Welcome to CMOs Without Borders.
I'm Joel Crampton. I help financial advisors, RIAs, and wealth managers replace scattered marketing with strategic systems that boost AUM and production volume.
I'm Mandy MacPhee. I am a fractional chief marketing officer and work with founders who are doing too much and need someone to turn their scattered marketing into a system that actually drives results. Chris is joining us today to talk about demand gen for founders. But Chris has a different take on demand gen. He actually calls it demand creation. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Chris. Tell us about demand creation for founders.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for having me today. This is really exciting. I've joined the ranks of the fractional chief marketing officer this year after 25 years, mostly in big tech. And after a couple of layoffs, decided it was time to go out on my own. It had always been my dream to do that. And what better time than the present? So great question, Mandy. I can't take credit for the demand creation term. A gentleman named Chris Walker, who started Refine Labs a few years ago, came up with it. But essentially, if you think about what the traditional sales funnel looked like, which is very wide at the top, and you're essentially putting hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of leads into the top of the funnel. And then by exclusion, you're kind of getting down to the point where people are much more qualified. Then there's a handoff to sales, and then they further qualify them, and a certain percentage of those convert into sales. So it's a very much a numbers game. Very few people who enter the top of the funnel end up as a sale. And in my mind, it's a really inefficient way to approach marketing. When you combine that with how people are consuming content in 2025, specifically in a post-pandemic world where we all consumed crazy amounts of content on a daily basis for a couple of years, and that's only gotten to be more and more, it put a filter on us where we really don't have a whole lot of patience for bad content, but we're also looking for that content to help us make purchase decisions. One other thing to add on there is people don't want to talk to another human being until absolutely possible. So when you think about the demand funnel as we see it today, it's not really so much a funnel, but more of a circle where people are consuming content on a daily basis from whatever platform they happen to be on or however they want to consume that content. And that is your opportunity as a company to get in front of them in the way that they're trying to consume content, either on the web, on a news site, on LinkedIn, Instagram. If you are showing up in front of them in a way that is meaningful, authentic, and engaging for them on that platform, they're starting to form an opinion about you, your company, your products. And we all know that at any given time, 95% of people are not in the market to buy. So really, this is about talking to that 95%. And at the point that they're ready to buy, you've created that demand already. That's the demand creation aspect. At that point, they're going to move on to conversion, and they're going to do something like they're going to Google you, or they're going to look you up in ChatGPT, or maybe they remember your website, or maybe they remember who you are from LinkedIn and they go directly to you to schedule a meeting. That demand capture portion needs to be very seamless. So you need to have a website that's optimal for education and letting people schedule time with you. Or you need to have a book a meeting function on your website or your LinkedIn or your YouTube. And then that demand conversion then gets much more simple than the big funnel where you're going through multiple lines of qualification. And really in this model, people have most likely already made the decision. Their conversion group may be one or two companies, but in a best case scenario, they've already chosen you before they've talked to you. So they're coming to you to kind of find out pricing and implementation, and they've already done all that qualification work that we traditionally did in that top part of the funnel.
I wanted to double down, Chris, on what you said around the fact that your content as a founder needs to be believable and needs to be, especially in that post-pandemic world. When it comes to your content, it also, a lot of founders are using AI to generate that content, and people are seeing through AI now and seeing that a lot of the content is the same across the board.
I thought it was interesting at the start of the AI adoption cycle, which probably started really like later in 2024. Some of the first roles that got eliminated were those content roles. Companies either decided not to hire new writers or they eliminated writing roles because people could do writing at scale with AI. But like many things, everybody started to create content with AI, and it started to kind of homogenize that content. And if you looked at LinkedIn maybe 6 months ago, you could see, everybody complaining about the M dash or the choppy writing style that AI does. The most interesting thing is that while those content roles were some of the first roles to get eliminated, I think they're also some of the first roles to come back. People are realizing that AI can't really replace the creative writing aspect of writing. And that's where, when we tie this back to founders, nobody can replace your voice as a founder. I don't care how well you train your AI, the unique ideas that are in your head, the unique experiences that you have had, those are your moat. That is the thing that nobody can replicate or replace. And that is how you have to show up. So while you might use AI to help you streamline some of the creative processes, I don't think AI should replace founders writing for themselves.
I would say that from a founder perspective, AI can help them write, but they have to feed it their personal stories. They have to feed it the right content. You can't train AI on your specific tone, but you can give it your personal stories, have it start the story, and then you go in and edit that story, create your own tone, and give it your own flavor.
Yeah, Chris, you were talking earlier about authenticity, and that isn't something that AI can create for you. Like you said, Mandy, you kind of have to give them that story to help write it. But it's also something that differentiates yourselves from the competition, as no one has that same authentic voice, as those same stories. And so that's how you stand out in the sea of sameness, like we keep talking about in this podcast, is there's just so many businesses out there offering the same thing that you do. And how are you going to stand out? And so it's that authentic voice, those stories, how you help people that does help create that demand. And so I want to get into a little bit more, Chris, about why you think, and Mandy jump in too, why founders of these companies have to be the voice of the company, and why those stories have to come from their personal accounts on LinkedIn, instead of having those stories being posted as the company.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Joel. And I would put the lens back on us, right? 3 founders who started their companies where there was potentially no brand for our company before. And I know when I started my company, even as I built my website and I chose my company name, which is Reverb Strategic Marketing, which quite frankly, I don't care, because people are buying from Chris Downey. They're not buying from Reverb Strategic Marketing. And sure, maybe that changes when I've grown to an agency of thousands. But right now, it's really important that people understand who I am, what I stand for, what my experience is, how I approach marketing. That's far more important than having a logo that I'm promoting. And I focus a lot on the cybersecurity space. I went to a trade show earlier this year, and I walked into a room with like 75 different startup companies that all looked the same. They all did similar things. Almost all of them had AI or IO in their name. It was that sea of sameness that you talked about, Joel. And the one differentiator I saw in the companies that really stood out is their founder was the face. And he was talking, or she was talking about why they started the company. What was the pain point that made them decide that they were going to put it all on the line for their company? And that was such a differentiator. No one can replicate that. And I think I've seen it in the content that you all produce. I hope people see it in the content that I produce. But we all approach marketing in a very different way. And that's what's great about marketing is it's like a puzzle with a million different correct answers. And it's more about how that fits the style of the company that you're working with. And that goes the same for any founder who's trying to come out with a product that does something either slightly or completely different from their competitors. And only they can really quickly, and I say easily just because I think it's already in their head, but quickly and easily explain that differentiation and that value.
I love your analogies, Chris.
I'm all analogies
I
all the
know.
time.
I love it. I love it. I think that with my experience and what I've seen with the founders that I'm working with today and what I've seen out in the marketplace is you're absolutely right, Chris. The companies that stand out are the ones that are sharing their passion and the founder stories in the market. I just talked to my client this morning and we were talking about her lived experience and why she set up her company. And it was all about experiencing the pain point and that she had experienced. And that's the reason why she created dreamcollege.ai. And her story is one of I had a kid in school and they just had such a tough time getting through the college admissions process. So she created this company to do that, to help people. And it is by far a phenomenal piece of technology that she's got that she's bringing to the masses. And those are the types of stories that make a difference in when you're sharing your brand and your story out in the market. You're absolutely right, Chris. It's not about the logo. It is about the founder story and the story you're telling about the company.
Yeah, I was just on a call with a prospect, and I get this question often: is so Joel, tell me about CMO Alpha, your company. Is it just you? I'm like, yeah, it's just me. It's one of those things that's us being fractional CMOs. We are our only employee of the business, unless, like you said, Chris, we grow this thing to tremendous heights. But and it's almost always going to be just us, and we are our own personal brand. People are buying us and what we can do for their business. They're not buying the name of the company. And especially when it gets down to earned media opportunities and you're getting interviewed by reporters and everybody else in the media. So when we're talking to founders, that's one of the strategies that I help put in place is getting that earned media, and they're interviewing the founder. They're not interviewing the company. And so that's the authentic voice that comes out in those articles or those sound clips or videos that are posted on those media platforms. They're seeing the face of the company, and us being fractional CMOs, we are the face of our companies. That's one of the reasons we wanted to put this podcast together, is to show our authentic values. This is who we are. We're real people. You're not buying a faceless agency. And again, I don't ever want to talk bad about marketing agencies because I've got a lot of friends in that business and they provide valuable services. But when companies work with us as fractional CMOs, they're always going to be working with us. They're not going to be passed off to an account manager that maybe leaves in a year or two. We're always going to be with them. And I think that's the case with a lot of these companies. The founders typically stay at the companies forever until, they retire. So I think having that authentic voice as part of that company is what companies really need to rely on to stand out in that sea of sameness, and just rely on those stories that are authentic to that individual founder.
As a fractional chief marketing officer, we're very different from agencies. You might have heard it from our first episode where we talked about this, but just wanted to flag that as a fractional chief marketing officer, what a full-time chief marketing officer does for one company, we do on a fractional basis for multiple companies at the same time. So it gives you value at a fraction of the cost. We're embedded in the company, embedded and part of the executive team, which is very different from working with an agency or an account manager or a vendor or a consultant who always sits on the outside.
Chris, anything to add to that?
I think one of the best things about the option of a fractional chief marketing officer when you may be considering your company's next move, or even in my case, where I work with a lot more seed to Series A startups who are maybe having the founder doing a lot of the marketing in many cases, or maybe they've got an intern or an entry level marketer that they brought on. Investing in marketing is a big, expensive decision. And it's really hard for people who don't have marketing backgrounds to make all those decisions. I personally am so overwhelmed in 2025 by the number of AI tools that everybody is supposed to be using, or you're doing it wrong if you're not using this tool. That changes every week. So bringing in somebody who lives and breathes marketing earlier on is really my sales pitch to founders. You're not having to pay for a full-time marketing leader, but you get the benefit of 25 years worth of leadership and experience and strategy so that I can hire on the right people to work on marketing. And because I'm there to lead them, you don't always have to go for the more senior level hires early on. You can hire more entry level people that can experience everything and learn from you and the company and hopefully grow with the company. So it helps you manage costs, because in a lot of this, you're going to need to be spending money on physical events and advertising and yes, AI tools as well. But bringing on a fractional to start off with, and whether that is for 6 months or a year or forever, I think is a much smarter move than investing in a full-time CMO in many cases right off the bat. But I also view my role, if I can grow marketing to the point where they need to hire a full-time CMO and I can help do the recruiting, onboarding, and then ultimately kind of fade away into the sunset as they continue to succeed, I view that as a win in my book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've done your job. Yeah, I've had that same
100%.
conversation before too. That I'm not trying to work myself out of a job, but ultimately, yes, I am. I want to grow
Yeah.
your company to levels that you can't even imagine at this point. And if that looks like I'm out of a job, then I've done my job.
As fractional CMOs, it's about building the foundation for the company, helping them at the get-go, helping them when they're starting out, and building them and growing with them until we get them to the point where, yes, they need that full-time help.
Mhm. So what's free is LinkedIn. You don't have to pay for service. So you're talking about all those expensive marketing platforms, Chris, earlier. Everyone can use LinkedIn. It's free. Just to get on and connect B2B. That's where you get that one-to-one connections with potential clients or customers. It's something that the three of us, I think, do very well on LinkedIn, is create a lot of great content, develop that demand an interest in what we're talking about. So, are there other platforms besides LinkedIn that you feel like founders should be playing on, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or maybe niche financial services platforms or forums? Or do you think LinkedIn is probably the best place for everybody to start?
That's a good question. And, I tend to work mostly with B2B SaaS startups, right? So if you're thinking about where their ICP is going to hang out in great numbers, it's typically going to be LinkedIn. It doesn't mean that they're not on other platforms, but the benefit of LinkedIn is that you know exactly who you're connected with, who they work for, what their role is. So you know that as you're building your company, you are speaking to the right person in many cases. Um, and I want to make one comment, Joel. You talked about LinkedIn being free compared to other platforms, but I'm going to go back to my ninth grade economics class and tan staffel, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. And that goes with LinkedIn too. A few months ago, I went through and I did an audit of 40 startup founders. And I saw that only 17% of them had posted in the last 30 days on LinkedIn, which blew my mind. It's 2025. How are you growing your business if you're not posting on LinkedIn? And yet such a large percentage of them were not. And I think that's because it is such a large time investment and energy investment to post on LinkedIn. And you then have people who then say, well, just have AI write it all. That's less time consuming. But that is your own personal brand, and your personal brand as a founder is your company's brand. So this is where I tend to lead very, very out in front with a founder-led demand creation strategy that early on, when a founder is all about going outbound to their network, and in many cases, if this was pre-LinkedIn, you're having to go one-on-one to people and then bring all that intelligence back to the company to help your product market fit, to help the product itself. When you put that same type of content, that, and I'm not saying a sales pitch, but talking about your passion on LinkedIn, you get feedback in real time from perhaps thousands of people. And that also incentivizes you to build your network with your ICP, to go out and comment on their posts. So that time investment pays back as it's creating demand that ultimately can be converted downstream. But to answer your question, Joel, you asked about other platforms. In a B2B company, I'm always going to recommend LinkedIn first. It is the platform that I think they could spend as much time as they're willing to put into it on that platform and never maximize everything that they could be doing there. I think YouTube, Reddit, there's quite a few other social platforms where I think they could definitely make a good dent in their pipeline. But LinkedIn is always where I'm going to start them, maximize things there, and then start evaluating other platforms after that.
How do you select the platforms, Chris? So when you're taking a look at demand creation for founders, you said LinkedIn is definitely the first one. How do you consider, what's your strategy on the next go-to?
It really depends on what it is we're trying to accomplish as a business, right? So now this goes from just kind of starting out with creating demand into like how we're doing the full go-to-market strategy. If you have a complex product, and a lot of the products at companies I work with can be pretty complex, people need to do a lot of research. LinkedIn's not really the research platform, right? Like you tend to consume 5 to 10 seconds worth of video at a time, or maybe kind of skim somebody's post, which is good. That is the expectation of people on that platform, is to consume content like that. But if they're actually looking to learn more, they may be going to YouTube, where it's not unheard of. I've had 1 hour and 2 hour long videos that people watch 90% of it. They're there to educate themselves before they make a final purchase decision. Other platforms like Reddit, people want to go out and talk to the community and find out, what are people saying? Have you worked with Chris Downey before? What is he like? And what's his product like? But those are a full-time investment on their own. You can't just go onto YouTube here and there. You can't just go onto Reddit once a month and call it a Reddit strategy. So that's really where LinkedIn, the platform that may not cost money for you to go onto, but the more time you invest, you get more back. Clearly, once you're on YouTube, the cost of video can be kind of extreme if you're going for more of a polished look. And so those are very critical strategic decisions to decide to add a new platform into your repertoire.
Yeah, I think you get really good at one, and then you can add on others. But until you've nailed that one channel, you're just going to dilute your efforts by then trying to be an expert at other channels. You can repurpose content from one channel to the next, and so that's how you get a little bit more runway out of content that you do create. But for most people, most founders, I feel like LinkedIn is probably where they should spend most of their time. In my space, and I work with a lot of financial advisors, that's B2C. But in my opinion, when you're talking anything social, it's one-to-one marketing. You're showing up as a person, talking to another person. And even if they don't respond to you, I don't know what the statistic now is on LinkedIn, but 90% of the content is developed by 10% of the people on LinkedIn. Everyone else is just lurkers. And so they're just digesting the content that you're putting out there. And like you were saying earlier, Chris, you're kind of creating that demand for them. So when they are ready to engage with you, they have this big bulk of content. They feel like they know you a lot better. And so when they actually do that outreach and say, yeah, I want to book some time on your calendar, they already feel like they know you. And so you don't have to spend a lot of that early time on a phone call with them trying to build up rapport. So I think it accelerates those sales conversations.
I think people always forget about the lurkers. They look through their social feeds and they see the comments, positive or negative, but that is such a small sampling of the people that saw your content. And I wanted to go back to something you said as well, Joel. Repurposing content. I think when you create the content yourself, if you're not immediately sick of it, you're probably sick of it by the time you edit it or post it once. But the reality is the algorithms on these channels show your content to a very small percentage of your audience. And that's every social platform that's out there. So even if you had an amazing post that performed better than you've ever had before in your life, I'll bet that 75% of your network still didn't see it. So I highly encourage recycling content. I mean, there are times I repost the exact same thing, word for word, and sometimes it performs better. But then also recreating it in different formats, creating a podcast, cutting it down into smaller pieces. Then you can take AI to take the transcript and maybe create a LinkedIn carousel for the content. There's a number of different ways you can break that down, but also then thinking about how people use those various platforms to educate. Again, YouTube is where people are going to be more into long form content. So a full version of a podcast is great for YouTube, but maybe the snippets are better for YouTube Shorts and LinkedIn and TikTok. And yes, TikTok can actually sell B2B, which is surprising, but very true.
Chris, you've got a lot of tactics in there and a lot of great advice for founders. One of the biggest pain points of founders is that they don't have time. They're doing everything across the board. They're trying to set up their product. They're looking at the technology. They're trying to do the ops. Some are doing sales. Some are doing marketing. So when it comes to demand creation for founders, the obvious answer is you got to hire somebody to help you with this. But where do they start? So if they only have a minute amount of time, where do they start?
That's the how do you eat an elephant question, right? Like I try to keep it very uncomplicated at first, right? One strategy that I use with founders is I go and I interview them for an hour. And I ask them a lot of questions about why they started the company. And again, this falls under this is the stuff they're probably sick of talking about, but nobody has actually heard it outside of their small circle. So when you kind of get them talking about it, and then you can take all of that content and say, here are like the 2 or 3 pillars that you want to talk about, and here are a bunch of content ideas. But to answer your question very directly, if you come to me and say, how do I get started on LinkedIn? And I did this yesterday with a founder, post something today. What is top of mind today? Do not wait. It's like waiting for the new year to start a diet or a workout routine.
Yeah.
Do it today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of founders are struggling also with LinkedIn as a platform because they're not quite sure how to balance being professional with being authentic when they're sharing that content. And so they're trying to figure out what's that line, personal experiences versus professional experiences. And I think what I've seen a lot of people respond to is those personal stories just about your daily life. There's people talking about their workouts or they're going on a run, or so it kind of straddles this line between what you do in a personal standpoint in your life versus how you show up as a professional in your business as the founder or leader of a company. But the term now is work-life integration. Technology is so prolific everywhere and it's with us all the time. And so there's just kind of this melding of personal and professional lives. And so why not post that type of content on LinkedIn? Sure, you don't want to talk about maybe your kids or some of those things, even though, I've had some content that resonates pretty well with my audience. We're all humans. So yeah, LinkedIn is a business platform. So I think the tonality of what you say on LinkedIn and certainly some of the things, and you really don't want to get into political or any highly charged topics like that because you can get into a lot of trouble and that stuff stays out there forever. So you want to make sure that what you put out there is impactful enough that it does generate interest and dialogue, but you also don't want to be on the hook for something you said years and years ago, which may not be relevant down the road, especially when it comes to politics. So you guys want to talk a little bit about how to straddle that line between professional and personal posts?
I'll start, Chris, and then you can jump in. I
Sure.
think my posts that are getting the most engagement are the ones where I am talking about something personal. I talked about my kids graduating. I've been talking about my weight loss journey and tying that back into my professional business. How it changes me as a leader, how I think differently. And those are the ones that are getting the most engagement, the most comments, and the ones that people are saying, "Oh my God, I noticed that post about you, Mandy. It's amazing what you're doing." So I would encourage that blend of personal and work. It creates that lived experience that I talked about earlier, and demonstrates your transparency and honesty as a founder.
I think that's a good point. And I think I've struggled with that throughout my career to kind of meld the personal and work. I always had my work self and my personal self. But when I started my own business, it was like people aren't going to buy from me if they don't know who I am. And I was going to say what I stand for, how I am to interact with, and how I approach work. I found, like you, like personal photos or videos do perform really well, and they're not necessarily personal. Like I've taken a picture in my garden, which is kind of like maybe a little peephole into my personal life, but it's really more a chance to have an analogy of like how I approach marketing. Now, if you're talking about the founder of a tech company or any company that somebody has like really put everything they've got on the line for something that they really believe in, if I'm not getting anything personal from them, and again, to Joel's point, I'm not saying talk about your kids and your family. I almost never would even mention my wife. I barely mention my cats. But it's to be able to kind of get an idea of like what my personal passion is. And I think one of the things that I recommend founders who are really stuck on where to start is to bring stories, like customer stories, into the mix. And even if they haven't had their first sale, that can be, this week I was talking to type of customer. You don't want to name names, right? But I was talking to a health food company, and they were saying their biggest technology problem is that their website gets hacked. And I said, oh, okay, that's something we deal with on a regular basis. And here's how I help them to feel better or to build a plan for moving forward and integrating different products to solve that problem. And that's personal because it taps into a personal conversation that I had that week without revealing too many personal details, which I think a lot of people, especially in the cybersecurity space that I work in, people are very tight-lipped about personal things.
And yeah, they are because they're used to the compliance around their businesses. At the same time, in the cybersecurity space, they have to learn to build trust. It's similar to the fintech space, right? You got to learn to build that trust. How do you build that trust? You build that trust by telling those personal stories.
Over and over again, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think people who've stuck along for this long of the podcast, right? Like they're going to start asking, well, this sounds like a social media strategy. And to a certain extent, it's a strategy that's taking place on social media. But I think what a lot of people don't like recognize that in 2025, the marketing funnel is anywhere that your target audience is consuming your content or consuming content, period. Because to Joel's point earlier, if your competitor is out on YouTube and you're not, that may be a gap that you need to fill. And so you really need to take a look at what your funnel, which again looks a little bit more circular nowadays, what does that look like? How are people consuming content? Because by the time they have a need, if you're not in that top one or two of their consideration set, you've already lost. They're not Googling you. They're not going to go on Chat GPT and ask about you because they don't know who you are. But they may go on Google and search out Joel Crampton, fractional CMO. They may go on Chat GPT and look for Mandy. But
Yeah.
if they don't know it at that point, it's too late. Lost.
I would almost say that the typical funnel is like this, right? You're saying the funnel is circular. I say the funnel is like this wiggly line that goes back and forth and all over the
Yeah.
place, right?
Yeah, whatever finger gestures we're using, I kind of do the circle with like
Yeah.
people consume like that. But
Yeah.
I think the point is valid, right? Like that's, if you think about how you consume content on a daily basis, a lot of people start the morning by opening up their phone and checking their alerts from overnight. And they may go into whatever social platform and consume a little bit of content while they're cooking their oatmeal. And then me personally, I sit down, turn on the Today Show and open up my laptop and I catch up on emails. But then I'm on the way to the gym and I consume a podcast on the way to the gym. So if I'm not on podcasts, websites, emails, you're missing out because that's how people make their purchase decisions now.
Yes. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
And I think we all go through similar process. We all, I mean, as fractional CMOs, when we first start working with companies, we do those types of things. We look at who our ideal clients are for that business. We figure out where those people are looking for information. We make sure that we have marketing strategies in place to show up in those areas. We also do competitive analysis to figure out what our competition is doing in that space. Where are they showing up? What channels are they on? What kind of content are they creating? And like you said, Chris, identify if there's potential gaps, and you want to be showing up where your competitors are, if that's the great space that they're finding a lot of their own prospects. But if just because someone's on YouTube doesn't mean you should go to YouTube as well. So you want to make sure that you understand where your customers are looking for vendors or other service providers like your company, and again, make sure you show up there. And then when you do show up, you have great content that is timely, provides a lot of value. One question I was going to talk to you guys about is how often should we be posting content on whatever channel it might be? How much is enough for a founder to stay visible without feeling like they're living on social media, or they're spending a bunch of money for people to create content? Mandy, you're great at creating content every day on LinkedIn, but I still see posts from you. I mean, LinkedIn's algorithm delivers your content to me and it says this was posted by Mandy 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be a great question for you guys just to dig into, is how much content is enough to create that demand?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. It's really interesting, and part of this is going to be platform specific, right? But I actually wrote a post about this last week because I see a lot of people on LinkedIn saying they've figured out the LinkedIn algorithm, or here's how you do this. And the algorithm changes so frequently and they're always testing new things. And I'm not just talking about LinkedIn here, but every platform. I think there is kind of a wrong amount of content, and zero is the wrong amount of content. But I would say honestly, like on LinkedIn, if you're not showing up 3 times a week, then, especially since people are not logging into LinkedIn every day, we as marketers, I'm on LinkedIn all day, every day, but most people don't. So showing up at least 3 times. And the reason I say 3 times, if you're a founder who is not comfortable posting, my challenge to you is to start building habits, just like you go to the gym, just like you meditate, just how you time block your calendar. I want you to schedule out time that you're going to build 3 text-only posts and schedule them in LinkedIn. And people are going to blow up the comments saying, oh, if you use the scheduler, it hurts reach. I don't care. This is about building habits with a founder who can then see what works over time and iterate from there. But in addition to just posting, some of the other things that work really, really well in LinkedIn is to go and participate in other conversations, meaning other people who post, if you have something meaningful to add, and it's not great post, but that's a really great idea. Here's my opinion on that. Go and comment. And I actually comment far more than I post. And if they had a great idea, connect with them. This is a social network, and you should be following people, connecting with them, like you've actually met them in person at a trade show and connected with them. So my short answer is 3 times a week, but work your way up to 5.
Manny, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree, Chris. I think 0 is unacceptable. I do think minimum 3 times a week. Look, I post every day, and it goes back to, and the reason I do that is because it goes back to Chris's comment earlier that the algorithms don't serve your content up to everybody at the same time. They serve it up at different times. They're serving it up to only a small portion of your audience. So by my logic is by posting every day, at least my content's being served up at different times to different people all the time.
And I think for me, again, working with like seed to Series A companies, these are early days with a company. This is
Yes.
do or die time. This is
Yes.
making sure you're finding people who may want to buy your product, informing them, telling them. And so it's really important early on to carve out that time. If we as fractional CMOs do our job right? That means that more revenue is coming in. There will be more budget to do other types of content, to hire social media people, to hire marketing automation people. But early days, nobody can replace that founder POV. So the founder has to do it. And it is expensive for them not to do it, but it's also expensive for them to do it because they could be doing something else. So, but I have seen firsthand not doing this has a direct impact on pipeline.
Great. As marketing folks, anything we do needs to have a metric or some sort of performance indicator beyond just likes or comments. We need to show some sort of engagement. Ultimately, revenue generation is how we justify a lot of the different tactics and strategies that we put in place. So are there any other key metrics or signals that founder-led demand generation is shown as working, not just on LinkedIn, but other tactics or strategies around creating that demand?
Yeah, I have a really strong POV on this, that attribution, while this was the holy grail for marketers for decades, and I think during the 2010s, we maybe got a hint of that we were going to be able to track everything down to the last action. But then people didn't want that, right? Like there's a lot of security concerns with all of that, and people sometimes just want to opt out of it. So
Plus, that's not how customers shop nowadays. They don't
true.
go just this one narrow funnel, this one path, like you were saying, the circle with all the dots. They're all over the place. And so, how to attribute one specific marketing strategy to that phone call, that outreach, that sale
Yeah.
is so tough.
And you're going to have go-to-market people that are going to have a lot of comments on this because multi-touch attribution, like there is a lot of math and a lot of tracking capability that you can do. But again, when you're talking about
It's not even with multi-touch attribution, it's not
not
100%
even
accurate.
not even
It
close.
is about looking at the direction,
long
and
term.
understanding the direction. It's not one-to-one. It is not even multiple to one. You can't accurately track it. It's based on a model.
Yeah. But here is the most lo-fi, most effective way to track attribution. When somebody comes into your funnel, so whatever CRM you're using, or if you're early days and you're using a Google Sheet, don't care. You have to ask the question, how did you hear about us? And this is not a drop-down menu. This is an open text field where they can write it in, because they're going to say, I saw you on LinkedIn. Well, that might have been the podcast clips. Or they may have Googled you to get to you, but they may have heard about it from a friend, or they may have seen you at a trade show 3 years ago. So having that open text field is, unless you're collecting millions upon millions of leads, you can go through that data and categorize it and track so that you can have a better ability to do your marketing resource planning for the next year.
Love that, Chris. I'm going to ask every single one of my clients to implement that on their onboarding. Love that.
Instead of
Open text
asking for
field.
first name, last name, street address,
Yeah.
mother's maiden name, it's just like, give me your first and last name, your company, your email, or not even the company, and how did you hear about us?
Yeah. Love that.
And there's a lot of AI tools out there that within those CRM systems that can take those open text fields and create a word cloud around that. So again, I think just having that
Absolutely.
having that open ability to have your CSRs, your client service people that are doing the intakes of those leads coming in, and just getting a train of thought. So maybe it's not one or two things, but really digging into how people are finding you, and so that does open up more of that multi-touch attribution. So talking about AI, this might be our last question. We'll see how far it goes, but I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up AI as part of demand creation. So, Chris, Mandy, where do you see the biggest opportunities for founder-led demand creation as it is going to be evolving over the next year or two with AI? Any new social platforms that are coming out there?
I think, at least for me, I think we are so hung up on saying the word AI because everything is an AI tool right now. And I promise I'll answer your question, but I go back to like the late 90s and early 2000s when you would go onto the internet. How frequently do you go onto the internet anymore? You're just online, right?
Yeah.
So I think the internet became part of everything that we do. Who could have thought back in 1995 that you would do almost all of your purchasing, cars and homes included, through the internet, right?
Yeah.
Everything that we do through AI, like you were talking about the word clouds and being able to take a bunch of unstructured data and create a word cloud around where I should invest my marketing for next year. Well, of course, AI can do that. And maybe you've got to use 2 or 3 tools for it right now. It's all going to be built into these tools inherently in 6 months. I mean, look at where we were at in January, the things that we're doing here in September. Most of this was like movie magic stuff that was never going to happen. But it's crazy, right? I think you need to kind of take AI and put it to the side and think about what is the marketing strategy, what is the business strategy, and if AI can help you do that, plug in the right tools. And the right tools may be dependent on how much money the company has. There are tools that I would like to be using, but I'm not even going to pay for the $200 a month Chat GPT. I do the $20 version, and it's perfectly fine for me.
Do you remember going back to the 90s? Do you remember having to dial into the internet? That
Oh, yeah.
awful,
Oh, yeah.
fax sound that
Yeah.
happened every single time. That was crazy when you think about it. And we are just online all the time. But yeah, AI's radically changed our worlds, and it will continue to change. I think that as marketers, it's about how do you use AI, and this is, I say this with my ed tech company, Dream College, as well. Use it as a co-pilot. Don't use it to pilot you. It sits beside you and it helps you along. It doesn't drive what you're doing.
I think the less you use AI in the beginning of your founder-led demand creation journey,
Yeah.
the more differentiated you are going to be from your competition because you're forcing yourself to have those thoughts. Now, where I would use AI, if you're not comfortable with your writing style, and I work with a lot of founders who English is not their first language, being able to plug that in and be able to like clean up all of your text like that and be more confident in your writing going out the door, or to be able to go through a transcript of a podcast that is an hour long and say, I don't want to have to read an hour of transcript. Give me the top 6 points that were made. And that's going to spark some ideas for you to write about that. And it can help you. So To answer your question, Joel, I think AI is going to be part of everything that you're doing, but I wouldn't let it do it for you. I think the more you use your own brain and have your own ideas come out of your head, the more that is going to help you get more leads into the pipeline and close deals faster. And that's all that matters, right? At the end of the day.
So I'll ask one more question, Chris, and I'll ask it, it's a similar question, but I'll ask it a little bit differently. If you had a crystal ball 2 years from now, where do you see demand creation?
I think, and I've seen this, if you think about how we as marketers looked at content back in like the 2000 and 2010s, there was a lot of content syndication and just we made a lot of bad content, right? Can we all agree that we made a lot of bad content over the last
Yes.
20 years? But it did the thing that it needed to do. There's zero patience for our target audience.
Yeah.
Whoever your target audience is, they will not tolerate bad content. So I think as AI continues to help us make content more cost effectively and more efficiently, the substance is going to get better and better. And I think 6 months from now, because I already see it here, but definitely within 2 years, it is all about the content and being able to have people take themselves through 99.9% of the buying journey on their own.
Yeah.
And then it gets really hard for us to budget, right? But you're going to have to find ways to know what content work to help educate and convert them. But I think as people become more chronically online, they want to talk to people less and less. And I don't know if I've ever picked up the phone in the last 2 years for a number I didn't know. And I barely pick up the phone for people I do know. So, to know where we're at for marketing in 2 years, it's content is going to be the number one thing.
Patience is a virtue, but people don't have patience anymore. As a founder, if I've started my content, my demand creation journey and started doing that, how do I capture my audience's attention immediately while they're scrolling?
It's hard because we're not creating viral content, right? I'll throw up the finger quotes again on that one, but viral content, like, my network, I don't, I don't want to go viral in any of the posts that I have. I would prefer that one founder reaches out to me on DM afterwards and wants to talk because of something that they saw that I wrote versus having tons of people engage with it who are not in my target audience. I think the answer to your question is more complicated than what you were asking, but I think staying consistent in your posting, looking at the signals that you're getting. So are you getting impressions? Are you getting comments and likes? And you'll know by way of like they're actually asking questions and things like that. But you can take that information and with a tool like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you can find your ICP, like the actual human beings on the other end of that. And this is a social network. You don't have to go out and talk to 1,000 of them at a time. Reach out to one person and have a conversation with them. I think that is one of the quickest ways to find out if this thing that you're doing is working. And you can share your content or ask questions. There's any number of personal approaches that you can take to that.
And I think that's why us as fractional chief marketing officers are so critical for companies. We can help them find their ideal customer profile. We can help them find the white space in the market and help them share their founder journey, starting with the foundation and building that foundation of messaging and value and voice. I think that a lot of founders think that product push is the best way to get their message out. It's understanding their client deeply and then presenting their product as a solution to their client's problems.
Agree. Well, hey, any last thoughts from you guys before we wrap up?
I will just say 2025 is a wild year for marketers. It's only going to get more wild.
Mhm.
But I think what an amazing time to be a marketer. The amount of change and innovation that we're going to see in the next month or 6 to 12 months is just so crazy. And I'm excited for it.
And I'll plug the fractional CMO role as well. Founders need somebody in their corner, working side by side, shoulder to shoulder with them, that can stay on top of the ever changing world of marketing and how the different strategies and tactics that they can put in place can help grow their company. So that's certainly a plug for us, but it's a plug for anybody in the marketing world that has these types of conversations every single day with colleagues. They're listening to all the podcasts. They're staying abreast of all the different topics and again changes with AI. So we just make sure that founders know that they're not alone. If they bring on the right people to help them grow their firm, then we're out there and ready and willing to help them. So, Chris, do you want to plug the types of companies that you're working with? You talked about cybersecurity, seed to Series A. You want to talk a little bit more about that and how people can find you?
Sure. So I focus on B2B SaaS, mostly cybersecurity right now. I tend to focus seed to Series A, like you mentioned, 1 to 20 or 1 to 50 million in ARR. But, a lot of these brand building, these demand creation strategies work for many other businesses. So if this was interesting, feel free to reach out to me. My network is also full of other fractional CMOs. So if I can't help you, I will find somebody who will.
All of us here, right? I talk to Chris and Joel almost daily, and we help each other all the time. So we've got a great network of other fractionals to help us along the way. Love that. And Chris, you're in Austin, correct?
I am in Austin, Texas. People always think I have an accent, even though I'm from the Midwest. Austin, Texas, not Boston, Mass. So if you're ever in Austin and want to know where the best tacos are, I will buy them for you. And if you're not in Austin, Texas, you can find me on LinkedIn.
My husband is so jealous. He said that you're so close to Kota for F1,
Yeah,
the track. He is huge F1 fan.
they've got a miniature replica for go-karts now that he can ride on when he comes down here.
We're gonna have to come and visit you.
And I'm in Kansas City, so if it may need some great barbecue, let me know. I'll point in the right direction. Mandy, what does Toronto have?
Toronto has a great multicultural experience, actually. It's got anywhere from Caribbean to Indian to Italian. We've got little Italy, little Portuguese, little China, little everything. So it's very multicultural here. We love it. Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks. Another great episode. Chris, thanks for joining us. Look for
Thank you.
his website in the show notes, and we'll put all of our LinkedIn profile links in the show notes as well so people can find us there.
Yeah.
Other than that, have a great week.
Thank you.
Had so much fun talking to the two of you today.
You too. All right. Bye, guys.